What if I told you that tonight I could disappear from everyone's life and nobody would even notice? You might think that sounds impossible or maybe even cruel, but the truth is sometimes people you love the most are blind to your presence. And tonight you are going to hear a story that proves just that. Imagine sitting in a room full of laughter and excitement, birthday candles flickering on a cake, 30 people around you, and yet a single comment from someone younger than you can cut deeper than anything else. My 13-year-old niece, she looked at me with a mischievous smile and said, "Mom says if you vanished tomorrow, nobody would even notice." The words hit me harder than a thunderclap in the middle of a quiet night. Everyone around laughed. They thought it was a joke, but I felt a cold weight settle inside me, like a truth that nobody wanted to admit. The room felt smaller, all the chatter faded into the background, and all I could see was the face of a little girl smiling as if she held a secret bigger than anyone else could understand. At that moment, I realized that appearances and routine can be deceiving. People can be so absorbed in their own lives that even someone who gives everything is invisible. I knew something had to change. I knew that staying would only keep me trapped in a world where my existence was optional, and tonight would be the night that started everything. A single thought ran through my mind, a decision that could not be undone. It was simple, yet terrifying. I could disappear, I could vanish, and I could finally be free. What would it feel like to leave without warning, to cut ties silently, to take nothing but what belonged to me, to erase the daily noise, the endless obligations, the constant need to be seen, to be approved? In that room filled with laughter, I felt the thrill of possibility and the chill of reality all at once. Every face around me blurred into shadows except the one that mattered most, the one who unwittingly handed me the key to a new life. The words of a 13-year-old that no one else took seriously became the spark that ignited a plan that would change everything. Tonight you're going to see how a simple moment, a fleeting sentence, can push someone to take control, to reclaim autonomy, and to step into a world where freedom is real and palpable. You are about to follow a journey that begins with a laugh, a comment, and an ordinary birthday gathering, but turns into something extraordinary, something that will make you question how much of your life is truly yours and how much you simply give away without noticing. Every second that passed in that room strengthened a resolve that had been quietly growing for years. It was like the universe whispered in a language only I could understand, saying, now is the time, now is the moment to act. The room, the laughter, the casual cruelty of words from a child, none of it mattered anymore. The seed was planted, the path was clear. The first step was simple yet unimaginable to anyone else, but to me, it was everything, the beginning of a story that would change my life forever. Hi, my name is Mary, and I've spent years helping people regain control of their lives, discover freedom, and find peace even when the world seems to demand everything from you and give nothing back. I have guided countless individuals, especially those in the later stages of life, to make choices that empower them to live fully and without fear. Today, you're going to hear one of the most personal stories I have ever shared, a story about a moment that seemed small but changed everything in my life. It is a story about realization, about action, and about the courage to step into the unknown. Many people believe that freedom is something you can only dream of when you are young, but the truth is the lessons we learn over decades make us stronger, wiser, and more capable of making decisions that truly matter. The story is not about rebellion or revenge. It is about clarity, about understanding the value of your own presence and your own choices in a world that often overlooks the quiet ones. I want you to imagine being in my shoes, feeling the weight of expectation, responsibility, and invisibility, all while trying to navigate ordinary life, ordinary relationships, and ordinary obligations, but realizing that the ordinary was never enough, that something had to change. In that very moment, that realization became the catalyst for everything that followed, and it is the same kind of realization that can awaken anyone, regardless of age, anyone who feels unnoticed, undervalued, or trapped. You will see how a single thought, a simple decision to act decisively can transform life overnight. This story will take you through emotions, confusion, frustration, and ultimately liberation. And I want you to follow closely because each detail matters, each moment builds upon the next, and every action taken has a consequence that you can learn from. Today, you will see how I transformed a painful observation into a plan of liberation, how a single sentence spoken casually by a child can ignite a determination to reclaim your life, to create boundaries, and to step into a reality where your choices are yours alone. You will discover that no matter how many years have passed, you still have the power to redefine your life and to make decisions that bring you peace and confidence. And this is why my voice here is important, why sharing this moment matters, because if a 13-year-old comment could change everything, imagine what acknowledging your own power can do for you in your own life right now. Most people assume that the people around them would immediately notice if they disappeared, that their absence would create ripples that could not be ignored, that their laughter, their presence, their daily routines are indispensable. But the truth is much harsher and far more unexpected. Studies show that many individuals, especially older adults, are often overlooked even by those closest to them. Sometimes it takes days or even weeks for someone to truly realize that a person has gone, and it is not. Because they do not care it is, because life moves fast, people are consumed by their own needs, their own schedules, and their own distractions, and in my case it was made painfully clear in the middle of a celebration. A simple comment from my 13-year-old niece shattered the illusion of importance. Mom says if you vanished tomorrow nobody would even notice. She said it so casually, so innocently, as if speaking a universal truth that everyone already knew, and yet no one else reacted except for laughter from other guests. The room filled with giggles and friendly teasing, but for me those words were a hammer striking the core of something I had ignored for years, the realization that despite my efforts, despite my care, despite all the ways I had tried to be present and helpful, my existence could be dismissed with a sentence from someone barely old enough to understand the weight of responsibility. It was shocking, it was cruel, and it was oddly liberating. The expectation that family and friends would notice your absence is a comforting lie that society tells us. It reassures us that our efforts matter, that our love is reciprocated, that our presence is valued. But sometimes the lie unravels in the smallest moments, in the briefest interactions, and suddenly you see clearly that the only person truly responsible for your peace, your autonomy, and your happiness is yourself. That afternoon I sat quietly as the room continued to buzz with conversation and laughter, and the comment echoed over and over again in my mind: how easy it is to be invisible, how simple it is for life to continue without you. And that clarity brought an unexpected gift, a gift that was the beginning of change. Because once you see the truth, once you understand that the world will not pause for you, that no one is keeping score, you are free to act without permission, to make decisions without justification, and to take the first step toward reclaiming control over your own life. I realized that what most people fear the most, the notion that they are replaceable or unnoticed, can actually become the exact catalyst needed to ignite transformation. And the moment my niece spoke those words, I understood that if I wanted to reclaim my life, if I wanted to experience freedom and autonomy, I had to stop waiting for recognition from others. I had to stop hoping that someone would notice or appreciate my presence. I had to act on my own behalf. Immediately and decisively, that single observation turned into a quiet resolve, a plan that began to form in my mind like a seed pushing through soil towards sunlight. I began to imagine how it would feel to leave everything behind, to cut ties, to cancel obligations, to remove myself from the patterns that kept me tethered to expectation. And as the laughter of the room swirled around me, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration, because what was coming next was not merely about disappearance, it was about transformation. It was about the realization that life could be reshaped one choice at a time, that every habit that constrained me, every responsibility that drained me, every unnoticed effort could be altered with intention. And that realization was powerful enough to keep me awake long after the party ended, because I knew the next steps would be irreversible and profound. And I also knew that by sharing this with you today, you would see how a seemingly innocent comment can break illusions, how it can expose truths that others prefer to ignore, and how it can motivate action that leads to liberation. That is why the break in expectation is so critical, because it wakes you up, it shakes the foundations of complacency, it forces the mind to recognize that the ordinary is not always enough, and that extraordinary change often begins in the quietest moments. In this way, the words of a child became the spark that illuminated a path to autonomy, a path that was previously invisible, because I had been looking for validation instead of trusting my own judgment. And that is the secret that I want you to hold on to as we move forward in the story. The next chapter will reveal the precise steps I took to convert realization into action, and how a single night transformed the ordinary into the extraordinary. And you'll see that suspense, curiosity, and careful decision-making are the keys to reclaiming your life, regardless of age or circumstance. The moment had arrived, the one that would mark the beginning of a profound change. The party continued around me, balloons and decorations, laughter and chatter, all forming a background noise to the sharp clarity of my niece's words. She held the phone. I had bought her an $850 device wrapped carefully with bows, and excitement in her eyes. She tore the paper with anticipation, and that sentence slipped out of her mouth. Mom says if you vanished tomorrow, nobody would even notice. The room erupted with laughter. 30 guests joined in the amusement, thinking it was a harmless joke. But for me, each giggle, each smile, each casual glance at me felt like a confirmation of the invisible status I had unconsciously accepted. For years, the irony of the situation was palpable. I had bought this extravagant gift as a token of affection, as a demonstration of care, and yet the very moment it was revealed, it became a reminder of my own perceived insignificance. The energy around me continued to flow in patterns that no longer included me. The conversations shifted to trivial matters, games, and stories that I had no part in, and in that absence of recognition, I felt a mixture of hurt and awakening, a realization that the world would not pause for my feelings, that existence alone was not enough to command attention or respect, and in that realization a seed of determination was planted. I could either continue to fade into the background to be noticed only when convenient, or I could act decisively to reclaim my life. I observed my niece in that moment. Her innocence, her obliviousness to the power of her words highlighted the cruel clarity of truth. Sometimes those who say the most devastating things do so without malice. They simply articulate what everyone else overlooks, and I felt the weight of years of unnoticed efforts. All the meals cooked, all the errands run, all the smiles offered, all the advice given, everything vanished in an instant in the eyes of the room. It was as if I were a ghost attending a celebration meant for others, a guest who mattered only as a shadow, a presence that could be removed without consequence. And that stark reality ignited a new perspective. The problem was no longer external. The problem was that I had allowed myself to exist in patterns that gave control to others, patterns that depended on recognition that was not guaranteed, and that acceptance that was conditional. I understood that this was the moment to redefine boundaries, to evaluate what mattered, and to make choices that prioritized my own autonomy. This was not about spite or revenge. It was about reclaiming agency over a life that had been diffused into endless routines that benefited everyone else but me. I remember the nights spent planning the future, balancing bills, helping others, and trying to maintain peace in a world that often took more than it gave. And suddenly, it became obvious that to truly experience freedom, I would need to sever ties, at least temporarily, to reset my life, to establish what was mine, to claim and to leave behind the expectations that had slowly become chains. Every detail of that evening became etched in my mind: the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the casual jokes, the candlelight flickering on the cake, the way people smiled at nothing and said nothing, the sensation of being simultaneously present and absent, the sharp sting of invisibility and the adrenaline of clarity. It was a paradox, a painful revelation, and yet a thrilling one, because once the problem was understood, the path to solution became conceivable. I realized that the issue was not the people around me, it was the dependence on their validation, and the illusion that recognition equaled value. The problem was the belief that my existence had to be noticed to be meaningful, and now that illusion was shattered in the most public of ways, and that public shaming in the form of a casual comment from a child created the perfect storm, the perfect impetus for action. It became clear that the next step had to be taken immediately. Hesitation would only reinforce old patterns, and in that instant I began to formulate the plan that would redefine my life. The problem was simple, yet profound. I was unnoticed, undervalued, and trapped in routines that drained me, and the solution would require courage, decisiveness, and the willingness to step into uncertainty, fully embracing the freedom that comes from taking control, fully understanding that sometimes disappearing, even metaphorically, is the only way to truly be seen. In the future chapters, you will see how this problem evolved into action, how realization transformed into concrete steps, and how the path that began with hurt and invisibility turned into autonomy, liberation, and peace. And this is the turning point, the moment when the story moves from recognition of the problem to the emergence of the plan that would change everything from ordinary existence to extraordinary freedom, the moment when a single sentence from a child became the first domino in a chain reaction that would alter the trajectory of a life forever. After the party ended, the laughter faded, the chatter dimmed, and the room emptied, leaving only the echo of my niece's words and the weight of realization. I knew the next step had to be decisive. The discovery was not a physical object, but a truth that had been hidden in plain sight for years, that I alone controlled the power to reshape my life. The moment of clarity was simple, yet profound. I realized that obligations, bills, subscriptions, and financial chains that had silently bound me could all be severed with a deliberate action. I had been living in patterns that granted others authority over my time, energy, and resources, and now I could reclaim them all with 2 taps of a phone screen. Every credit, every subscription, every automatic payment that dictated my days could be erased, vanished, with the simplicity of intention, and that discovery was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. I imagined the relief that would follow, the liberation from months of unnoticed effort, the shedding of responsibility that was never truly mine, and the possibility of stepping into a life dictated solely by my choices. In that moment, I felt the tremor of empowerment ripple through me, a mixture of adrenaline and peace coexisting in perfect tension. I looked at the devices around me, the screens, the bills, the reminders, and the accounts that had silently accumulated weight over the years, and I understood that all of them were just constructs bound by habit, fear, and societal expectation. They were the Invisible chains that dictated not only my actions but my perceived value, and with the realization came the plan I could cancel every payment, close every account, disconnect from routines that no longer served me, and step into a world where my presence mattered, because I chose it to matter, not because anyone else acknowledged it. The night was quiet, the house settled into its usual rhythm, but within me a storm of resolve and excitement brewed. Every step of the plan mapped in my mind, every consequence anticipated, every outcome weighed, and yet the allure of freedom was irresistible. The first taps were deliberate, precise, and final. Credit cards closed, bills stopped, subscriptions erased. It was like watching invisible walls crumble around me, each removal a declaration of autonomy, each deletion a statement that my life belonged to me, and only me. And as the night deepened, and the last confirmations appeared on the screen, I felt a weight lift, a burden dissolve. The discovery was complete. The realization that I could act decisively and instantly reshape my reality, that I could disengage from obligations that constrained me, that I could choose who I interacted with when I existed and how my energy was spent, was intoxicating and empowering. I felt the pulse of potential coursing through me like electricity. The ordinary world outside remained unchanged, unaware, oblivious to the quiet revolution taking place within me, and that contrast intensified the thrill, the knowledge that the world would continue uninterrupted while I stepped into a life of intentional choice, amplified every heartbeat, every breath. And that is the essence of discovery, the understanding that liberation is always within reach, that sometimes the most dramatic changes come from the simplest decisions, that recognizing your own power can transform fear into action and uncertainty into clarity. I planned every detail that night, the route to take, the items to bring, the clothes, the essentials, and most importantly, the mindset, the unwavering knowledge that every choice I made from this point forward was mine alone. And as I packed the small black backpack that would accompany me into the unknown, I felt a sense of finality, the last tangible connection to my previous life sealed within it. And yet the real discovery was invisible. It was the awareness that autonomy is not given, it is claimed. It is not dependent on age, wealth, or recognition. It is a choice to act decisively, to step into uncertainty with courage, and to honor your own existence above the complacency that others accept. Without question, the discovery was transformative. It turned fear into strategy and invisibility into a plan of liberation. And as dawn approached, the first steps of execution were imminent. The world outside would continue without pause, while inside me a revolution of choice had already begun. The discovery was complete, and yet it was only the beginning. The next chapter would reveal how this newfound understanding translated into action, how theory became reality, how a night of clarity became a lifetime of freedom, and how a simple decision in the quiet of my home unleashed a chain reaction that no one could have predicted. And that is the power of discovery. When you see clearly, you act decisively, and you change everything. That night I moved out. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint echoes of the party that had ended hours before. I carried only a black backpack, every item carefully selected, essentials only, nothing that tethered me to the life that had confined me. Every step I took felt heavier and lighter at the same time, heavier with the weight of finality, lighter with the freedom of choice. I left the familiar streets behind, the familiar faces, the routines that had dictated my days for years vanished with every step toward the unknown. The backpack on my shoulder was more than a container of items. It was a symbol of autonomy, a declaration that from this moment forward my life would be governed by my decisions alone. No one could dictate my worth, my presence, or my path. The transformation was not sudden, it was gradual, yet decisive. Each action I took reinforced the reality that I was free. The first morning without obligation, the first sunrise witnessed without expectation, the first meal prepared solely for myself, the first breath taken without seeking approval from anyone else. Each moment was a reminder that the life I had envisioned was attainable, and that liberation was both exhilarating and grounding. The black backpack contained the tools for survival, but the real contents were invisible. The mindset, the courage, the clarity of purpose, the unwavering belief that my existence mattered because I valued it. These were the true instruments of change. The world I left behind remained unaware, my disappearance unnoticed, exactly as my niece had predicted. Yet the irony was liberating. I was finally seen by the only person who mattered, by myself, and that awareness carried a weight of serenity that no attention from others could ever provide. The first week was challenging. The routines I had abandoned sent echoes into my mind. Doubts surfaced, responsibilities I had left unresolved attempted to resurface, but the strength of my newfound autonomy anchored me. I had discovered the power of intentional absence, the transformation of invisibility into liberation, and the beauty of life dictated solely by choice. The backpack became a symbol, each item a deliberate reminder that my freedom was tangible, achievable, and irreversible. Every night I reflected on the moment that sparked this journey, the casual comment from my niece, the laughter of the guests, the oblivion of the room, each piece of the past transformed into motivation, each memory sharpened the resolve to remain unbound by expectations, and as days turned into weeks, the transformation solidified not through dramatic gestures, but through consistent adherence to the principles I had established: self-reliance, autonomy, clarity, and prioritization of my own peace and well-being. These principles guided every decision, every interaction, every plan, every thought. The transformation was holistic. It encompassed emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual realms. The freedom to choose who to interact with, where to go, how to spend time, and how to allocate energy became the foundation of a life rebuilt from intention rather than obligation. The sense of exhilaration grew each day, reinforcing that transformation is not merely about changing location or possessions. It is about reclaiming agency. It is about transforming perception and redefining reality in alignment with personal values and priorities. I discovered that the power to transform exists in every decision, the courage to act decisively, the willingness to leave comfort behind, and the commitment to honor your own needs over external expectations. The backpack carried a notebook, a few essentials, and items of survival, but the real transformation was internal. It was the courage to break free from invisibility, the confidence to trust my own judgment, and the clarity to recognize that life is not about being seen by others, but about being true to oneself. Every choice reinforced the transformation, the deliberate actions, the setting of boundaries, the refusal to return to patterns that no longer served me. Each moment was a brick in the foundation of a life reimagined and reclaimed. And as I settled into this new reality, the first time I smiled without seeking permission, the first time I felt content without external validation, the first time I embraced solitude without loneliness, each of these milestones marked the profound depth of transformation. And that is why the story of that night matters, not because of disappearance, but because it illuminates the path from invisibility to autonomy, from obligation to intentional living, from unnoticed presence to self-acknowledged existence. And in the next chapter, one will share the key lessons I learned from this transformation, how they can be applied by anyone regardless of age, and how, even in the later stages of life, it is possible to reclaim control over your reality and experience freedom and peace in a way that is tangible, deliberate, and deeply fulfilling. The transformation taught me something invaluable, that is the power of autonomy, the ability to make choices that are truly your own, and the realization that freedom is not dependent on age, recognition, or approval from others. It is a mindset. It is the deliberate decision to act on your own behalf, to prioritize your peace and well-being, and to trust your own judgment. The first lesson is that visibility in the eyes of others is not the measure of value. Your worth is inherent. It does not require validation from family, friends, or society, and understanding this allows you to step into your life with confidence and clarity. The second lesson is that small decisions lead to profound change. It was 2 taps on a phone that canceled every obligation, that freed me from financial chains, and allowed me to step into a life directed by choice. Every action you take, no matter how minor, may be the catalyst for liberation. The third lesson is that courage is a daily practice. It is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Each morning, I reminded myself that stepping into uncertainty is necessary for growth, and that comfort zones are often disguised prisons. The fourth lesson is that preparation and intention amplify results. The backpack I packed contained only essentials, but it also symbolized clarity, focus, and planning. By consciously choosing what to take and what to leave behind, I reinforced my commitment to autonomy and minimized distraction, and that is applicable to anyone at any stage of life. The fifth lesson is that liberation is holistic. It encompasses mind, body, and spirit. Making decisions that honor your needs, emotions, and energy creates a life aligned with your values. The sixth lesson is that age is not a barrier to transformation. At 65, 70, or 80, you still have the power to redefine routines, reclaim control, and experience fulfillment. The seventh lesson is that reflection magnifies insight. By reviewing your choices, actions, and motivations regularly, you understand what serves you and what limits you, and can adjust accordingly. The final lesson is that peace and freedom are cultivated, not inherited. They require awareness, decisiveness, courage, and persistence. And applying these lessons does not require grand gestures or dramatic escapes. It can be as simple as reorganizing daily habits, prioritizing self-care, setting boundaries, and choosing where and how to spend your time. The story illustrates that even in ordinary circumstances, extraordinary change is possible when you recognize the patterns that constrain you and take deliberate action to reshape them. Imagine taking one small step today: a phone call, a schedule adjustment, a boundary set, or a financial decision made deliberately. That alone can spark a chain reaction of empowerment. The key lesson is not the act of disappearing. It is the mindset of intentional living, the courage to reclaim autonomy, and the understanding that your life is yours to direct you. are capable of creating a reality that reflects your values, desires, and needs. And that is the essence of what I want you to take from this story. The principles are simple but powerful. Recognize your worth independent of external validation. Understand the impact of small, deliberate actions. Embrace courage in the face of uncertainty. Plan with intention and cultivate holistic freedom. These lessons are accessible to anyone regardless of circumstance, and they can be applied immediately in practical ways in your daily life. You do not need to wait for permission or approval from others. The empowerment is yours, the choices are yours, and the peace you seek is achievable today. And by embracing these lessons, you begin a process of transformation that is sustainable and deeply fulfilling. And now, as we move to the final chapter, one will guide you in taking these principles into action, encouraging engagement, reflection, and application so that the story does not end with me, but continues into your own journey of freedom, autonomy, and meaningful living. Now that you have followed the story from the initial comment to the transformation, it is time to take action in your own life. Every lesson, every insight can be applied today. Do not wait for tomorrow. Do not wait for someone else to notice or approve of your choices. The first step is simple. Recognize your value independent of external validation. Understand that your presence matters because you choose it to matter, and then act deliberately. Small steps are the foundation of big changes. Reorganize your schedule, eliminate distractions that do not serve you, prioritize activities that bring peace, joy, and clarity, set boundaries firmly and kindly so that your time, energy, and attention are protected, and do not hesitate to make decisions that honor your autonomy. Financial choices, personal routines, even the simplest adjustments can start a chain reaction that transforms your reality. The second action is reflection. Spend a few minutes each day reviewing your choices, your actions, and your priorities. Consider what serves you, what drains you, and what aligns with your values. This simple practice will keep you grounded, intentional, and empowered. The third action is courage. Embrace discomfort, knowing that growth often comes from stepping into the unknown. Make one deliberate choice today that challenges routine or expectation, and notice the impact it has on your confidence and sense of control. The fourth action is consistency. Small actions repeated daily lead to sustained transformation. Continue applying lessons from this story to habits, interactions, and decisions over time, and the effects compound into autonomy, freedom, and meaningful living. Now, I want to invite you to engage with this community and this content. If you found value in this story, click the like button, share your reflections in the comments, and subscribe to the channel to continue receiving insights, inspiration, and actionable lessons that can be applied immediately. Your engagement not only supports the creation of more content, but also strengthens your commitment to your own transformation. And as a final reminder, do not forget that there is another video available right now that can guide you further into understanding autonomy, intentional living, and practical steps to reclaim control over your life. It is appearing on your screen, and I encourage you to click and continue this journey. Do not hesitate. Do it now before distraction or hesitation take over. The fifth and final action is application. Take one lesson, one principle, or one small step from this story and implement it immediately today before the end of this hour. Make a choice that honors you, that prioritizes your peace, and that solidifies your autonomy. Remember that freedom is claimed through action, consistency, and courage. And by taking steps today, you begin a transformation that is real, tangible, and deeply fulfilling. I am Mary, and I am here to guide you to see the power within yourself, to recognize your worth, to act decisively, and to live intentionally. Every moment is an opportunity, every choice a chance to reclaim control, and the first step begins now. Click like, subscribe, comment, and engage with the next video to continue your journey toward a life of clarity, peace, and empowerment. Your freedom, your autonomy, and your peace are waiting, and the path begins with the simple decision to act.